Your eyes do not deceive you. We're back for the final day and the first session of Annual Conference Live 2019. We've got two amazing guests with us here today, Richard Cohen and Kevin Gruenberg. Before we get started, though, before we get into the substance, I want to ask you a hypothetical, right? So day one, I was head lifeguard in charge. I got the lifeguard T-shirt. Day two, I was captain of the ship. On day three, I've been demoted from my captaincy, and I'm now just a mere tourist. Say you're on a vessel, and over the 3 days of the trip, those kinds of personnel changes have happened. Are you staying on the ship? What are you doing? What's going through your mind? Head lifeguard to captain to just mere traveler.
Well, I'm not going on the ship to begin with because
No.
ships and I don't get together. I can't speak for Kevin.
Yeah, I'm probably getting off the ship.
Okay, not too much confidence in my, not too much confidence. Luckily, we're land bound and we're here to have a conversation free of the water. So I want to get right to the substance. Your presentation yesterday focused on elevating the really the important role that fathers have in children's lives and in families' lives. You know, most approaches that have to do with supporting families usually focus on mothers. What led you to really focus on the role, the importance of fathers?
Well, both Kevin and I had experiences where we recognized the gap in services for fathers. I was doing a presentation for a fatherhood conference and was going to talk about bonding and father-baby bonding, and could not find an example of the still face with dads that included the still face experiment that included a dad. They were all with moms. And Kevin was working with a prenatal and neonatal program and wanted to start a dads group for expectant dads, and just couldn't get enough people organized to do it. And that started us on a path where increasingly we've been recognizing where the gaps are.
Real gaps, it sounds like.
Well, about 50% of the parents are dads.
So I hear.
And at least 90% of the programs and 99% of the research is on moms. And so there's a basic gap right there.
Yeah. So there's a gap, it sounds like, in the information and resources available. What are the benefits of fathers for children and families?
Well, I think this is such a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because it sort of precisely exemplifies where our field is at in infant and early childhood mental health. Because we'd never asked that question about mothers. We know what benefits mothers have. We know that mothers promote the development of a child's social emotional development, cognitive development, physical development, and fathers do too. Although fathers do it differently. Fathers tend to interact with babies in a more kind of rough and tumble way. They tend to hold babies outwards. They tend to promote autonomy and things like that. But that said, they they're capable of doing all the same things mothers are doing besides breastfeeding. Yeah. I mean, I think about this father I was working with, and at about the 9-month mark, I was watching him play with cars with his baby, and his child would run the cars off the table. And his father would catch them and bring them back to the table. And what I was really thinking about was how his son has so much trust in him, has so much faith. And that's a lesson that is quite existential, something that he'll have forever. And mothers can do that too. Fathers can do that too.
That's incredible. So I know that both of you have been involved with a home visitation program specifically with fathers. First, can you tell us a little bit about that program? What was that about?
Well, we were connected with a partial hospitalization program at UCLA for mothers experiencing perinatal depression. And they would refer dads who were interested in participating to us, and we would go out and provide an hour and a half a week for 12 weeks or more with the dads on the floor with the babies, and beginning talking mostly about supporting their self-efficacy as dads, but ultimately getting into all kinds of other things, other areas of support that were critical for dads as they dealt with this very complicated situation. And there's some really good research now by Ruth Feldman in Israel that shows that when you, that sensitive fathering can buffer children's, the risk of mental health issues for children when mothers are severely depressed. And so it can reduce the rate of psychopathology in children. Verbalization, physical contact.
Following the child's lead, social gaze, reciprocity, things like that.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah.
So I know that as part of this project, you also conducted some focus groups. What did you find when you were in these focus groups with their fathers? What did you find with respect to what their needs are and what barriers they face?
So I think we're not far enough along yet to tell you what we've learned from the father group or from the father focus groups. But I will sort of disclose something that's quite embarrassing and shows you about this sort of implicit bias that even we have about fathers. So we were developing a questionnaire, and one of the questions we asked was, if you had a question about parenting, who would you go to for support? So we had Richard and I, and we're working with a psychiatrist at UCLA and another researcher at UCLA who's done a lot of fatherhood work. So we make this great list of answers. You know, everything from a therapist to the child's mother to pediatrician. We had a long list. And in the first focus group, the dad said, well, what about my own dad? We didn't even ask, or we didn't even have that as a choice. Of course, we changed that because obviously we believe in that men can go to fathers for support around fathering. But it just goes to show you this sort of bias that even we have around the work that we do.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
As we think about what programs do exist, what kind of gaps are there for existing programs with respect to wanting to include fathers in the first place? Programs that exist right now.
Well, everyone that we talk to says that what they want to do is they encourage dads and they welcome dads and they try to engage dads. And that's a good baseline.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that. But it's basically, there are structural issues. So, for example, there was a program in Los Angeles that until recently, because the mother is the client in this program, if the mother was not home but the dad was, the home visitor was instructed to leave, right? Don't have the session. And it wouldn't count if she stayed and worked with the dad. It didn't count as a session for billing. There's been this tremendous and wonderful and exciting increase in awareness about the importance of maternal mental health. Both Kevin and I have been involved in a program in Los Angeles called Maternal Mental Health Now, which is encouraging, and the American Academy of Pediatrics is now, best practices includes depression screening for mothers. But the rate of screening, the rate of depression for fathers is almost as high as for mothers, but there's no movement to encourage the providers to screen dads for depression. So there are just some very basic structural things and then some programmatic things, and those are two of the most glaring examples, but they're everywhere.
Wow, that's incredible. So as you speak to that, let's say a program is interested in really improving the ways in which they support fathers. What kind of questions can they start to ask themselves to identify some gaps that they might have with respect to their ability to serve fathers?
Yeah, so there's a group in Alameda called the Fathers Corps that has a father-friendly checklist, and I'll name a few of those things which I think are really right on. One is about does the staff have training in fatherhood? Or father-related issues. Do they welcome or include dads in their programs? Do they have programs that are specific for fathers? Do they, what are some of the other ones? Do they have a staff member that's focused on father issues? I think something that Richard and I think about is, are they doing assessments and screening of fathers? Are they providing reflective supervision around working with fathers? And that's something that we think is quite important. That's not actually on the list yet, on their list, but.
Wow.
And there's a British cultural anthropologist who has an amazing book called The Life of Dad. And she has these wonderful suggestions about ask dads how they're doing. You know, very simple things when you're in the home. Ask dads how they're managing. Include dads in the conversation. See if they need anything. Just some very simple, straightforward places to start. Try to schedule visits at times when dads can be there. And with flexible work hours the way they are now, it is possible to do that without having to work in the middle of the night for many families. And so just when you're talking about who is in the family, find out what the status of the dad is even if he's not living in the home. Alan Michael Graves, who ran Project Fatherhood in Los Angeles for many years, talks a lot about fathers, particularly in African American communities, who are not living with the mother and the baby, but are highly involved. And most programs, we just assume father's not there, father's not in the home, so not involved, we go on. But actually lots of dads are involved. They're just not physically there all of the time, but they're in the lives of the children. So be sure to find out about that and include them.
Wow. Incredible. Thank you both. Thank you both so much. If we have viewers at home who are interested in learning more about the home visitation work that you're doing with fathers, where can they go to get that information?
Yeah, so actually Richard and I are in the process of starting an organization around the work that we're doing called Love Dad, love comma dad, like a letter. But we don't have a website yet. Website is coming soon, so probably the best thing is to email us.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for taking the time joining us today. And thank you for joining us at home. Make sure to tune back in. We've got so many more great conversations just like this one. And you can join us at 0to3.org/AC Live. Don't miss out.